Welcome to your channel Fiesta Fun TV.
Sometimes something as simple as your job can turn into a battle for your very life. Working late nights in the Don's kitchen when she is trapped inside the freezer. To warm up and try to get help and, above all, keep going with this movie called Mili, let's go. The movie begins with Mili introducing herself in an interview with her 24 years of living in the state of Don. Her father, who is a nursing graduate, plans to travel to Canada to get a better job. Supporting her now desperate family right after that we see a subtly ominous aunt. The future events of this movie: by falling into the freezer there you will be lucky. Now we follow Mili. While she goes about her daily routine, she helps her family with medical help and advice. She attends an IELTS training class and then heads to her job in a shopping mall on the way in. Harassment by a rickshaw driver before passing the very friendly security guard. The hours at the restaurant where she works are called Doon's Kitchen, like Doom's Kitchen, as we will. Soon to meet Mili a standard working day for the most part, but sometimes she gets a phone call on the store phone from someone begging her for forgiveness. This is Samir, Mili's friend. She called. She's been slacking off for the past days and he seems so desperate he calls the. She stores herself, but Mili does the right thing and hangs up on it. She explains to her co-worker, the friends, that Samir lied about attending a job interview at the party and that's why she's mad at him. After work she goes to see a movie with her father. While waiting for it to start she gets another call from her boyfriend and ignores it once more, only for him to reveal that he is sitting right next to her. On top of that creep move, Samir refuses to leave until Mili forgives him, and after enough begging and charming she reluctantly agrees. Alright, this should be seen as a huge red flag for any relationship, right? Calling someone at work to make a personal call is already not great, but stalking them is something else entirely. Samir didn't just accidentally end up at the same theater during the movie itself and in the seat next to the right. He obviously followed her there, and then she refused to go away unless offered, and this is not someone you should be friends with. Not to mention the emotionality of such people can be dangerous, especially when they don't get it their way. Mili has to end things with this guy permanently and then equally distance herself as possible, which should be fairly easy since you're hopefully going to Canada anyway. Since Mili isn't the savviest when it comes to relationships, we get to see clips of her spending the time Samir added to another montage of her daily life. At some point we see her at work shows. How does the baby Neil fidget spinner work? Small details become reality important later. She also got a good result in IELTS but cannot hide the fact that she is leaving. It will become increasingly difficult for her to put up with her friends and family as Mili arrives home from work one night. He again catches her dead cigarette smoking. Tired of his yelling, ignoring his health, she dumps all his hidden smoke and lighter the next day. At work, she and a coworker are in the toilet's freezer, and the coworker says they get it. The cold is easier because they are vegan and Mili doesn't because she eats meat now. It seems like an excuse, and it might be, but there is actually some truth to this. Good meat, it is full of proteins, and proteins cause the greatest increase in heat production during metabolism as well. Red meat is a good source of iron, which helps stimulate blood circulation, which in turn helps keeping warm, so your diet can influence your body's regulation of temperature. Myth. Mili receives a phone call from Samir telling her he has got a job but will have to leave town because he also agrees to pick her up from work even though he was out partying with some friends and drinking. After visiting the temple, they ride home together on his bike. When he is, the officer flags them down for not wearing a helmet. Samir rushes to pay the fine and tries to leave. He is in a hurry with the excuse that he just wants to bring Mili home, but the officers find his behavior. They are too suspicious to give him a breath test and find him drunk, so they take the couple to him station. That's why Mili was obviously picking a best friend for everyone there. Don't drive drunk. If we really care about someone, we shouldn't put their life in danger by giving them lift while we're drunk, and we shouldn't have jumped on anyone's bike if the driver is drunk now too. In the end, Mili said she got to the police station to pick her up, and after telling her what happened, she finds out that Mili has a boyfriend who seems to have been hiding Samir from her father until he has a job now. The father was very hurt by this revelation, refusing to speak to his daughter at all for the next day, and even pays extra to expedite her flight to Canada. To work, understandably upset, she tries to at least enjoy her lunch break but is berated by her manager. To do this while a group of clients are there, so Mili throws her lunch and gets back to work. We're now fast forwarding to past closing time and our character is kind of reluctant to go home because about the situation with her father. At the same time, we see the manager outside the store talking. When the supply delivery arrives, the two other remaining employees are eager to go home and celebrate. But the manager orders them to put the food boxes away first. They reluctantly comply but wear them out to Mili on their way to the freezer and begged her to do it for them because they had good plans. Mili agrees, grabs the freezer key, and waits for a clue as to why in the world you're going to get into the freezer. I need a key now. I've worked in restaurants before and I got in and out of freezers all day. For a long time and none of them had a lock on them for safety reasons. In fact, they always had a slot mechanism from the inside. Now I'm sure there are freezers with locks in this world. But why does this store need a store? They have already secured the restaurant inside a mall, and that the mall itself is actually secured if you've worked in a restaurant before you knew it. Employees pull supplies from freezers all day until all of this lockup is done. It slows down productivity and creates a contrived death trap for which I am grateful. But well, we're in a movie where freezers have locks. If that's the case, then they should. You also have some sort of safety device in place to either allow unlocking from the inside. But why does this store need a store? They have already secured the restaurant inside a mall, and that the mall itself is actually secured if you've worked in a restaurant before you knew it. Employees pull supplies from freezers all day until all of this lockup is done. It slows down productivity and creates a contrived death trap for which I am grateful. But well, we're in a movie where freezers have locks. If that's the case, then they should. You also have some sort of safety device in place to either allow unlocking from the inside. Turning the lights on and then turning them off, Mili notices things are getting dark and just tries to leave. Only to discover she is locked and she bangs on the door and calls her boss in a panic. But it's too late, he's already outside and it might look awful in confinement. Well, but we need to stay calm and think rationally. We can easily call for help with our cell phone. She reaches into her pocket and bag to find her phone but realizes she has already left it. The counter outside is so good that I think that realization sends her off right away. Back into a panic as she returns to banging and slamming the door with immediate threat. Here's the cold, of course. So where does the cold come from? The freezer fans. If we can somehow stopping or preventing these cold will not be able to spread, and if it can spread around us, you should be able to survive at least long enough for someone to spot us the next day. Prioritize turning off fans before anything else. Anyone who's lived through winter knows how quickly the extremities harden in cold temperatures. We see that the cold will hinder our actions over time. Trying to escape while they're still active will now make us less effective at stopping mobs. It should be fairly easy. Some models have exposed wires or tubes that allow us to mess around them and separate them if that is not an option like in the movie. Directly, we can just block the fans by moving a shelf or stacking enough boxes in front of them. It's not perfect, but we can still also break the fan by jamming something in it, such as the metal legs of the step ladder or a box of frozen goods. There are multiple options, but I think it's safe to assume that we would be able to break this thing rather sooner than later. But instead of stopping the cold, Mili decides to try and smash her way out by ramming the door with a cart without success, though fortunately her dad still seems to care about her and is calling her co-workers to find out why she isn't home yet. The colleagues call every other employee and even the manager to try and find Mili's whereabouts. After learning that Mili had clocked out, they all incorrectly assume that she must have left the store. I mean, it's a fair assumption, but you know what they say about assuming. At least they could have communicated the last whereabouts of Mili that they knew about, which of course was the freezer. Now I'm not sure if that would have been enough to reopen the mall and go to check, but it certainly would not have harmed stating that. Now we get to see the freezer's thermostat, which shows minus 12.5 degrees Celsius, about 9.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Our character is already showing signs of hypothermia as she frantically tries to warm herself up. Apparently she has already given up breaking out and has no thoughts to stop the fans. If we are going to try and simply tough out the cold, we should be doing more than just Rubbing our arms together, Mili, for example, has a casual shirt in her bag to change into after work. It's thin, but every layer of clothing helps massively. On the other hand, it really doesn't help that she's wearing sandals. We also have the bag itself, which we could put over our head. It may sound a bit silly at first, but any exposed skin is causing us to lose heat faster, so covering all of those spots first is task number 1. Number 2 is to avoid the cold air circulating around. If we are unwilling or unable to stop the fans from pushing the air, then we need to move. We moved ourselves to a place where the cold air couldn't pass above us. That's something an igloo does. The first thing the igloo will do is create a barrier between you and us. Cool air moves over our skin, which means there is a bit of convection that makes us feel cold afterwards. Trapping is done in any heat, but for those igloos usually require heat retention. Compress snow as a building material, but don't worry, cardboard is actually pretty good. Also an insulator, and this is a material we have a lot of here and high, so it's in a block. The shape is already shaped for easy stacking properly, so we have to take apart some boxes and put them on flat on the floor to protect us from the metal surface below, and then stack as many of the remaining parts as possible. One's in a pyramid pattern over us with this heat-trapping structure and as much of our exposed skin covered. We can sit back, think warm thoughts, and just wait for all of this to blow over. Mili doesn't lay out all her supplies, but she does manage to notice a ticket she had left in her pocket. Looking at the time, she realizes the last movie playing in the mall's theater today will be ending soon, so she grabs a metal tray and prepares herself by the door once it's the approximate time and everyone is exiting the theater. She furiously pounds a tray against the door and screams for help. No one seems to notice her efforts except for this kid who's playing against the restaurant's glass. However, the father ignores this and just carries them off. Now Mili was actually close with her efforts here, and even though it was a long shot, this was worth trying. Another way to attempt to get someone's attention at this time would be to knock the heavy shelves over to send a tremor through the floor and hope someone hears it or feels it. It also would be better if the fans were off or we had a warmer shelter to retreat into afterwards in case this fails. Now some time passes, and the thermostat now reads -16 degrees Celsius, about 3 degrees Fahrenheit, which I guess is enough to finally motivate her to do something, so she decides to empty her bag and check for supplies. She takes her extra shirt and rips it into pieces and then uses some conveniently placed duct tape. Why would this be in the freezer to fashion gloves and socks, which is a superb idea if we're going to cover our extremities, though rip the bag up as well and tape it around the limbs if we could. Also use cardboard, some packaging from the inside the boxes, or even just stick duct tape directly onto our skin to help retain more heat. Why not? Now, after making this first good move, Mili goes as yet again back to patiently freeze to death in the corner until she looks up and notices the fans. That's right, she takes a piece of cardboard, then pathetically uses it to block the stream of air. And of course miserably fails, as a cardboard is easily blown away. If that wasn't enough though, she also falls in the process, hurts her elbow, and causes the shelf to crush her foot. Right, well, it was a good idea, but unfortunately terribly executed. She was clearly struggling because her hands were already cold, which is why she should have done this much sooner. Now meanwhile we cut to her family filling out a missing persons report at the police station, the same cop that she met them the other day. She notices and says she's probably just with her boyfriend. It's a good assumption, but as a cop you shouldn't assume things, and actually you have to do your due diligence properly. Anyway, her father and uncle go to check with Samir's parents, but find out that he left him to go to his new job. We cut through the fridge again as Mili checks her feet and thinks they are dislocated, so she slips between two more metal shelves. It is held together with some cardboard and then re-screwed in place. Fixing a dislocated joint is important, but perhaps even more important is stopping the common cold, because this will undoubtedly kill us, but the injured foot will complicate matters. With the help of a rodent, she gets her hands on a kid's meal that comes with a couple of missions. New additions: first snack, restore her some energy and fidget her at the end. Leads to an epiphany regarding the freezer fans. Well, it tore a metal shaft from fallen shelf and uses it to pry off the metal cover in front of the fan. She forces the pole in, but it goes flying out of her hands. Now first, why take the cover off the fan? The pole fits through the cover, and by leaving it there it has something to get stuck against. Second, if the cover is off, then shop something bigger in there, such as a box of frozen food, the step ladder, or even tipping one of the shelves into it. Now the fan shouldn't be powerful enough to stop the pull, so either this is movie magic, which I guess it is, or Mili is suffering from serious fatigue at this point, with the freezer being now chilled at below 17 degrees Celsius, which is just 1.4 Fahrenheit. Things get even more desperate. While she's clutching her back, she feels something strange in the pocket. It's her dad's lighter. It's a bit late, but you know how these movies go anyway. She immediately flicks the lighter on for warmth and starts a small fire by burning paper from her school book. The room, it starts getting warm right away, but the air also starts to get cloudier when the coughing starts. Realizing what is going on, she immediately puts out the flames as Mili stares at her. Ashes from her textbook noticed an image of an igloo and decided to try the idea. You set up boxes on top of a falling shelf to form a shelter that pulls out a box to block off the entrance. And clicking on the lighter to stay warm. This is a very good attempt, and using the rack saves a bit of build time too, but the metal on the rack would also allow for that greater conductivity than just boxes alone, because metal is not a good insulator. In addition, lying on the floor, which is very stupid because all the cold air is on the floor. Down at the police station, the family tries to convince the police to trace Mili's phone. He takes this as an order and decides to show his power by violently interrogating Samir. Luckily, the boss arrives and puts a stop to it at this point, which is pretty cool. They now have law enforcement taking care of the missing person. They must return to a mall where Mili works so they can check the security cameras. From there they should be able to see that she hasn't already left, can narrow the search for her by family. On their way to the suspect later, when Samir gets an idea, but instead of sharing his idea, he just has to stop the car because he's borrowing one of his friend's bikes and driving around for a bit. Later, the E-cell management locates Mili's phone and they call the police, with the officer nonetheless is still bitter about not being in control of everyone, so he decides to keep it a secret. Mili throws meat at the freezer fan and happens to make a miracle shot that jams the fan grate. One down, one more to go. She shoves additional meat around the fan to make sure it stays jammed. A good call as well. Samir finally enacts his plan, which is to talk to one of Mili's co-workers again, and finds out that Mili was last seen taking supplies into the walk-in freezer. He tries to call everyone else and inform them of this, but his battery is dead from trying to call Mili all day long, and apparently no one else around has a phone that he can borrow. As he rushes to the mall on his bike, he crashes the car in full-blown Bollywood fashion, but miraculously survives and heads to the mall. Anyway, at the same time down at the station, a cop with an actual conscience tries to convince the other officer to report where Mili's phone was found, but he refuses, claiming he does not care. A criminal with an apparent heart of gold overhears his conversation and distracts the bad policeman so that the good cop can find the information of Mili's phone and send it to his superior. Mili's father and the uncle are comforting each other when they are noticed by the mall-friendly security guy we saw at the very beginning of this film. He overheard someone was missing and asked to see a picture. He recognizes Mili and says that he hasn't seen her leave work that day. With all parties finally knowing where she is, or at least suspecting where she is, everyone rushes to the mall. Unfortunately, the manager hasn't arrived yet to unlock the door. Meanwhile, Mili, without knowing that her people are there to look for her, she discovers a screw on the wall. She's leaning back. She used her hair clip to remove it. Behind the painting, she found a maintenance pole, and she uses the last of her strength to hit a tray with pipes in the hope that someone will do it. Hear her and guess what would have happened if her father had walked past to hear that she fainted and fell. Sania assures her father that she should be there as the principal, and Samir easily arrives also at this time, and the door opens. Everyone rushes to the freezer where they find Mili. The unconscious would rather be known to remove the hypothermic victim from the frozen environment. Daddy simply holds it in his arms and sighs, "Yeah, the genius move there." Now we cut it to at the hospital, where everyone is talking to the doctor about Mili's condition. He tells him not to worry about anything at all. Mili was wearing conspiracy armor the whole time. What a relief. Didn't expect that from a Bollywood movie. Anyway, they're told she has frostbite all over her body, but it will heal, which is true if it was only superficial, which I don't think it would. But after all that time, the doc goes on to say that she was in below 18 degrees Celsius for 5 hours, but survived because she is strong, at least we now know. And finally, Mili's dad and boyfriend gather around her bed and decide for her that she will not be going to Canada. Mili asks about their financial debt, but father just says that they will manage no problem. So, and that is a very unexpected happy ending of this beautiful, amazingly done movie. What is the moral of the story? Well, if we stay away from lock-in freezes with locks on and follow basic safety instructions, we should be good.
Thanks for watching our appointment with another movie.